Welcome to April. So good to have you here again. Let's get right into it. For the month of March, I have been chipping away at Project Rings, and I'm happy to report that I'm going to try and do the cool thing the other YouTubers do. 70%. Otherwise, just take my word for it that I've done about 10 out of the 14 chapters for the novella. Very excited and happy with the progress. I will say one thing though. I'm at that awkward stage in a story where there's a few ways I can end it, and so I'm really just been searching for the best way to sort of get to the last third of the book and make sure that it ends in a way that is satisfying. I really don't believe in good or bad endings. I believe in satisfying endings and following the story through. So yes, that's been the update for March from a writing perspective. As mentioned, a few other things in the previous video, you can check those out, that will be bringing changes to this channel. However, I won't be going over them here. I thought what could be cool this month is to actually review and showcase everything I've written. There are a couple of reasons for this, but number one is, well, this is my YouTube channel and I'm an author, so naturally I would love to showcase you, a potential reader and or fan of my work, or just even someone casually stopping by, to showcase and show you what I've written, and number one, why it exists. I think that's important. So for me, this month, I want to showcase the books I've written and tell you how I got to writing these books. Having grown up in South Africa, I used to always make up these fantasy games and worlds in my head, and obviously quite, consuming video games at a young age, and then reading some books and watching shows and things like that. You naturally, at least in my head, formed quite an imagination, and I used to always gravitate to telling my own stories to my friends and making up these imaginary games with different characters. Oftentimes it would be war or conflict, or some sort of conflict happening in these worlds, and putting the character, aka my friends, through these various scenarios. And I realized as I grew older that I could just write these down. As I got a little bit older, I started brewing and building this idea in my head. There are a couple of things, key series and events and I guess influences that really stuck with me throughout whatever I did. I think a big thing was the human heart wrestling with itself. George R.R. Martin speaks of this quite often, and I really enjoy that aspect of writing characters that struggle with the decisions they make. You put them in difficult scenarios and you see how they react. You build a world around them that reacts a certain way, that has a certain set of rules, and I think it's very important to put your characters then in that conflict and see how they react. So for me, that was really at the core of what I'm trying to write and what I'm trying to portray in these books. I know it sounds a little bit edgy, however, I do think it's a very fascinating element of human psyche, or alien psyche, depending on how you approach or see these characters that I've created, to see how they wrestle with these difficult decisions. The other thing I've always been intrigued by is political intrigue, and how that stems into conflict, and how wars are started with political meanings and what's behind the scenes and things like that. So for me, the Echoes of Ascension series has really been a culmination of years of thought and building up to that. So big influences from Dune, even Warhammer 40k has some really very deep and interesting lore, and then there are just great character shows, for instance like Breaking Bad, putting ordinary people in extreme situations and seeing what happens to them and how do they develop their character and things like that. So that over the years has carried me to creating and wanting to write a novel. So one day I just sat and I just thought, what if I just took this idea and I put it on paper? Which is often I found how a lot of the greats have done it. They just thought, I want to write, the voices inside my head, aka the ideas are just bothering me so much they need to get to paper. So this is why and how I found myself writing the first book in the series, When They Whisper. Fair warning for those who want zero spoilers for anything that I've written. This is your warning to click off now. I will be talking very light spoilers, nothing too heavy. I just wanted to articulate what I've written with these books. So if you don't want to see that, cut through to the final thoughts section of this video, and then I will see you there. When They Whisper, my first novel, is I had the idea of having this character start from nothing, very similar to, let's say, a Star Wars or a Paul Atreides, someone who starts from nothing and then learns slowly about the abilities that him and his family have had for generations, and how it's carried across and how he has the burden of taking this on. This is a classic story done many times, but I wanted to put my own spin on it. And I'm not going to spoil how that spin plays out over the writing of the two books. However, I wanted him to be a very specific character, and especially in the first book, Max, you can see, is written a very specific way, and his development and his frustration with what he's been sort of given almost is palpable. I wanted that to develop and actually carry across into the series and through the series, and you see him develop into what he eventually becomes. Whether that's good or bad, that's for you to find out. The other thing I was really fascinated about always was, I guess, the perspective from the other side, the higher ups, from the bad guys. What and how do they process things? When things shift and change in a falling and crumbling empire, who at the top is making the decisions? What are their decisions? What are the things they have to wrestle with? Hence the spawning of Manfred, the other major POV character in this book. So these two characters are the ones that you see in the first book, and you see the struggles that both of them go to. Now, one is obviously in a very high position of privilege, very high up, and so their decisions and struggles are very different to, let's say, Max, who lives at the sort of bottom of the barrel of the empire, and the things he has to go through. So through that, I think I've created a story that is gritty, a little bit painful, and for me, intriguing. So if that's something that sounds good to you, you might like it as well. But that's the sort of summary of it. Through a bit of brutality, war, and conflict, I think I've created something that I'm very proud of. That, of course, led to book number 2, Talks of Peace, which is the second in the trilogy. And I wanted to challenge myself with this novel because I've created and established this universe, but for people to believe your universe, you need to go deep, really deep. You need to create political systems, belief systems, economic systems that people believe and want to read more about, right? If you think about our society, how do we live every day? There are different beliefs. We live in a different political system, depending on where you're based. You live in a different economic system. Some people in the West adhere to capitalism. Back in the day, communism was quite prevalent. So in my world, it's how do people interact with the systems built around them? Why were these systems established, etc., etc. So the main goal for Talks of Peace was to really, really move and go deeper with these systems. Talks of Peace, which was released in December of 2024, has been out, and I will say this, it was an absolute slog. I wrote 120,000 words that year. Now, for a lot of people, that's not a lot. For some people, that is a lot of words, and for me, I really stretched myself right to the end. So that was a slog for me, but when I finished the product and when I got to the end of the novel, I think I really, in my opinion, achieved what I wanted to achieve with that. So I was really, really, really happy with how it came out. And I think, again, if you like that sort of gritty sci-fi genre, a hero's journey, but maybe not so traditional, the story really much follows to that. And that's the other thing I wanted to add to this, is I believe that war and your world needs to have consequences. Actions need to have consequences. So if A happens, then B needs to happen within the established rules of your world. So Talks of Peace takes that idea and pushes it even further. Last but certainly not least, I have written the Galaxis Chronicles, which is the accessory novellas to the first novel. They add that first layer of depth, and they actually move the plot line along, especially with novella number 2. It's 4 short stories about some key characters from the first book, and sort of a lot of them are backstories, and some of them are just interesting stories from around the universe that I've created. And I actually just had a lot of fun with that. It's awesome to just, when you create a long plot, a deep plot over a couple of books, you have to really, really think about what you've established, and you've got to make sure that everything is coherent and makes sense. With Galaxis Chronicles, I feel like I had a bit more freedom, and you were creating everything from scratch. When you create everything from scratch and you don't have to link everything together the whole time, you're able, the words just really flow. So I was really happy with those 4 short stories, and I'm so excited to share them with you, actually, that I will be releasing them mid-month for the next 4 months. You can actually go and look at the first one out now, Ugula, right here on this channel. You can go listen to it at absolutely no cost. So please enjoy that, and let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So yeah, finally enough, Lestion, who you meet quite early in book 1, was such a beloved character from the alpha readers that I had to write his backstory. The character mentions that he served in the time of war, so that was a natural progression from there. So his story is actually him serving for the Empire during the Second Rebellion. So yeah, if you'd like to see what he got up to and some other key stories during the first book, etc., stay tuned on the channel. I'll be releasing these over the next 4 months. Some final thoughts. Thank you for taking the time and listening to me blabber on about everything I've written. I've realized, as a writer, all we want to have is people reading our works. But I think that's a hollow and empty pursuit. I think the beauty of writing oftentimes is you in the process of writing and figuring the story out and having these characters you created go through certain things. It's almost like you make a bunch of friends and things like that throughout. So as I head into 2026, when I write the final book, this year, as I've mentioned before, I'll be writing 4 novellas for completely different worlds and submitting them to a contest just to see how I do. However, in 2026, I will be returning to this world and finishing the story. It is very important for me to finish this story, as I truly believe stories have a start and an end. So I will definitely be finishing it next year. Very excited for that. I wanted to thank you again just for sticking by, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful, wonderful April ahead. Peace.